a person was to look back in their life, what would be the most important factor that made their life worthwhile? Is it their career? Is it their wealth? Is it their fame? Is it their family? Is it something a little bit more philosophical like their belief or their accomplishments? Well, for Chi and Yu, I believe that it is each other. It is the relationship that they have with each other and the adventures that they've done together throughout their lives that make their life worthwhile. And as we come to the very last episode of this series, I have a feeling that no matter what happens in this episode, nor what may happen beyond the series, so long as these two have each other, they will be okay. So what's up, people, and welcome to the episode 12 discussion of Girls Last Tour. And as mentioned before, episode 12 is the final episode for this series, and after this, we will have to part our ways and say goodbye to these two young girls. And because this is the finale of the animated version of the series, a tremendous amount of information was provided to answer many of the questions that have come up during this series. Now, episode 12 starts off where episode 11 left off, where Chi and Yu are still in that giant machine which they don't know is a submarine. But what they do know is that it has adequate power, and it has a decent shelter, and so they find it to be an enjoyable place to stay. And so the episode starts out in a very lighthearted manner with the two girls enjoying their exploration of this shelter. And during this time, Chi and Yu have those discussions that are characteristic to those two girls, and they do find some chocolate to enjoy while having their conversation. But eventually, when they try to take a photo in memory of their adventure, it triggers the submarine to turn on its view screen and display the information that's in the camera onto the screen. And Chi and Yu are bewildered by what's going on, but they do notice that all the photos are the images of the shots that they have taken, and they realize that what is being displayed are all the images that they took. But what they also find are additional folders that are in the memory of the camera. And when they open one, they find out that there are additional shots that were taken by Kanazawa, the gentleman who they met, who was making maps of the environment, and the man who gave them the camera before they parted ways. And what's interesting is they see that he is standing with another person, a lady, and they wonder who that lady is. But while they're thinking about it, they find all these other directories still closed in the camera, and when they open them, a whole slew of not only photos, but videos come out. And looking at the videos, you realize that the information that's stored in this camera spans a tremendous amount of time. Some of these images turn out to be of the timeline of our era, while others turn out to be images of the world at a much later time, as you realize due to the surroundings, such as the multiple layers of the world that you see in the background of this image. And what you realize is this camera is providing an entire history of what went on in the world. Now, one of the most notable ones is a video of these three girls doing a science project about their sentient robot that they have made. And one of the interesting things about this robot is that not only is it programmed to be able to self-replicate, but there is an additional program that's there so that the robot can actually self-replicate in a manner that's slightly different from the way it's designed. In other words, they have given this robot the ability to evolve. And what's interesting about that, of course, is then when you see Nuko, you realize that throughout this many, probably hundreds of years, this evolution has continued to go on in the machine race to eventually end up with live sentient beings such as Nuko. Now, aside from that, there are additional information about the world. Many of them turn out to be very family-oriented and focus on some of the relationships that many of these families or these friends had, and it's quite heartwarming to see. While others turn out to be quite concerning and revolve around not just one war, but many, many wars that occurred. You could understand that these are different wars because they happen in different eras. Some of them occur in the era such as ours, where you see countries that you're familiar with attacking other countries. Whereas others become these very foreign, unusual looking situations where you're not quite sure what's going on. But definitely the humans did continue to war amongst each other. And so you see this cycle between the war and the peace that happens. And so even during our era, there seems to be warring times, and you see images of that. And yet you see peaceful situations such as these, which you know are much further beyond that point because you see already the many layers of the worlds being built in the background. And then you see wars that occur in that era as well, and other wars that continue to go on probably further along the line. These wars not only occur at later times, but the types of wars seem to become bigger and bigger as the machines of destruction become more powerful. And somewhere along the way, we do realize that there was a nuclear war. And that is probably one of the reasons that the current world is so devoid of life. But it may not be the only reason that is the case. Whatever the situation, the humans were the ones that decided to annihilate themselves and probably use the sentient machines to help accelerate that annihilation. Now, since there is no true explanation in what Chi and Yu see, but rather just a combination of images, many of the viewers can interpret different interpretations of what may have happened in history. And in fact, Girls' Last Tour will not ever clarify what exactly happened in history. Not just because of the fact that that was the objective of the writers, but because of the fact that that's really not the main point of the story, which is the adventure between these two girls. And from their perspective, since they haven't been educated to the history of the world, and since their experience is really only within the adventure that they have, they really do not comprehend much of what they see. And if anything, ironically, they get a feel-good out of this situation because for the first time since their journey, they feel less alone seeing so many images of so many people on the screen. And so there is this very cynical situation that gets created by this particular part of the episode where you see a lot of what happened that eventually caused the annihilation of humanity, which is very, very dark. And yet the response that these two girls have is something that is a lot more warm-hearted with regards to the enjoyment of being with people, even if the people are just images that are on the screen. And so with these images that they could continue to explore, with the extended amount of power that's available in the nuclear submarine's nuclear reactor, and the possibility of finding some food and shelter here, they were actually in a reasonably good situation for the first time in a really long time. But of course, since this is Girls' Last Tour, fate has it that it's not going to last for a really long time, and this happens when Yu meets with a large version of Nuko. Now this is one of these creatures that looks definitely like one of those statues that you saw during their journey. And what's interesting is that when she arrives to the situation, she witnesses this large creature eat Yu and then run away. And so this creates a situation of a dire crisis, especially for Chi, because it is for the first time Chi realizes what is so important in her life when it is taken away from her, and that is you. She realizes that you may have actually been killed, and if that happens, she really, truly is alone in the world. It is a feeling of such despair that she doesn't know what to do, and she frantically goes running around trying to find that creature to the point where she breaks down in hysteria at the situation. And it's at that time that she does realize what does make her life worthwhile. As much as the adventuring is there, as much as the food is important, it really doesn't mean anything unless you is with her. And this understanding gives Chi such a determination to save her that she finally gets up out of her hysteria and goes running after the monster that ate you and ran away. Now, since this is a summary and there's only a limited number of places that they can go, Chi eventually does catch up to the monster, and what she finds out is that the monster didn't eat you, and the monster spits you back out again. And it is at this time that we finally find out what that monster is. It's definitely related to Nuko, and it's definitely related to those statues that they saw. This is a sentient being, basically a man-made creature that has evolved to the point that it is a living entity. And the purpose for its existence is to clean up all of the unstable energy material, such as the radioactive energy sources that are contained in this submarine, which is why they're there in the first place. And the reason it ate you was not to consume you herself, but to actually eat the energy source that was contained in the camera. And what's interesting, of course, is that since their job is to destroy those energy sources, that camera and all the information with regards to the history of the world just got destroyed with it. It is something that isn't really dwelled upon in the episode, but it is something that the viewers will probably realize while they're watching this particular episode. And this entity continues to talk about what has happened to the world, that basically the world is going back to sleep because all of the life forms on the surface have basically withered away. And once they finish their job of getting rid of all of this unstable material, they themselves will also go into hibernation and let the planet heal itself before it comes back to life again. And one cynical statement that they make during this conversation is that they have traveled a tremendous amount of the world to do their job, and from their travels they assess that Chi and you are the only two life forms left, which of course makes you wonder what has happened to Kanazawa or what has happened to Ishii. And in fact, it implies that maybe they have died. But it doesn't have to be interpreted that way, and in fact, the series is left so open-ended that you could make whatever interpretation you like. What these sentient beings have said is during their encounters, they feel that Chi and you are the only two life forms left. But it doesn't mean that they have encountered every surface of the world and they can scan every surface of the world. For all we know, it's just that they haven't encountered Ishii and Kanazawa, and they may be okay. However, it does definitely imply that there are very few people left in the world, and regardless of what has happened to Ishii or Kanazawa, first of all, these two girls will never meet those two again, and it doesn't take away from the fact that humanity is going away. Now, why I also feel that Kanazawa and Ishii still may have the possibility of being alive despite what the creatures have said is because if the creatures are able to completely scan the world and there is no longer any life anywhere, then that would indicate that during the journey, these two people just happened to meet with the last two remaining humans on Earth. 4 people remain in the entire surface of the earth, and for some reason they all were able to coincidentally cross paths. This is something that's very unlikely, and because of that, I do feel that it indicates these creatures really don't have the ability to scan the entire planet. The other reason why I feel that Kanazawa and she may still be alive is because during the dream that she has, she dreams of what she experienced when she was with Grandpa and why they had to leave that area. During that time, she remembers her hometown and how there were other people in that town. And for whatever reason, they seem to be in battle with some unknown enemy that you don't see from Chi and Yu's perspective. And it does seem like they did leave that area because Grandpa told them to, knowing that eventually that town may actually get destroyed. Whatever you feel with regards to what has happened to Grandpa and the other people, it seems to indicate that there were other people on the world as well. So if there was all these people, and every single last surviving entity that was on the face of the earth just happened to coincidentally meet with Chi and Yu, that's too high a probability in my opinion. And so if there are pockets of such life forms that Chi and Yu have met, then there's a good probability that there are other pockets of life form in the other parts of the world that may not be known to these sentient machines. But once again, that doesn't mean that there is a chance for humanity. Humanity does seem to be going away because its ability to survive seems to be really gone. If these sentient beings are eating all of this unstable energy, because it is unstable, then humanity may lose its ability to create energy. And we already know that food is extremely scarce, and when those two resources are unavailable, it becomes very difficult for humanity to continue to go on. This is especially so because the world around them is completely machine, at least in the level that they're at. In which case, even agriculture is not possible because there is no soil to which they can actually grow food. And so this may definitely be what has happened to the world. The world has constructed so much in terms of man-made machines, and because of that, humanity does seem to be going away. But the story is Girls' Last Tour, and it's not about the future of humanity, but about the adventures of these two girls. And what Chi realizes from this entire crisis, and what gives her strength, is that it doesn't really matter to them what happens to the rest of humanity. So long as they can continue their adventures together, they will be okay. She understands that to her, the most important person in her life is you, and so long as she is there with her, she will have the strength to continue on. And so we leave these two under this situation where they now have to go out and look for a place to survive once more. And regardless of what happens with humanity, Chi and Yu's adventure will continue. Because this series is not focusing on their demise, this series is focusing on their relationship together and the adventure that they had during the 12 episodes where we had the fortune to be with them. And for that, I will thank these two characters for giving us the ability to travel with them and to see the world from their eyes. And so with that, I bid goodbye to these two characters and wish them the continued, safe, and strong journey. And so this has been the discussion for episode 12 of Girls' Last Tour. Just like with Chi and Yu, I thank you for coming down the journey with me. And whatever happens in your manga adventures in the future, I wish you all the best. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.